Take the GRC, for example, which at that time was criticized as fixing the opposition. Now, far from fixing the opposition in fact has used the GRC to make inroads. So I'm writing about the Lee Kuan Yew era. I was a young minister thrown in the deep end and was involved in those discussions. Even then, for me as a newcomer, I found it fascinating to observe that there was this level of detailed discussions and that Mr. Lee Kuan Yew was a towering figure, but he was prepared to engage in a discussion, and the younger ministers spoke up. And even at that time, I felt, wouldn't it be good for others, including my friends, to know that this is how the cabinet works? It should be reassuring to Singaporeans for them to know that things are not rushed through at breakneck speed. In fact, it took many years before the elected presidency was enacted. So after I stepped down, I felt the same way and discussed with Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, who shared my view that it's worthwhile writing it up. But I can say, and I've said, that indeed that aspect of Prime Minister encouraging the colleagues to speak up was continued in Goh Chok Tong's time and Lee Hsien Loong's time. In fact, to his credit, Goh Chok Tong, when he was DPM already, introduced the mechanism or tradition of pre-cabinet lunch discussions. That means everybody except Lee Kuan Yew would meet on an informal lunch session, and we have a free-reeling discussion. It had two benefits. The ministers bonded, and ministers were able to float ideas, proposals in a very informal setting, so that later on, when the paper did appear in cabinet, there was no big surprise. So there was an additional layer of discussion which continued. Take the GRC, for example, which at that time was criticized as fixing the opposition. Now, far from fixing the opposition in fact has used the GRC to make inroads. They have two GRCs, right? But is that bad? Not necessarily, because the whole idea of the GRC is to provide a mechanism to guarantee that there will always be adequate representation of the racial minorities in Singapore. Never mind whether it is a PAP minority MP or opposition minority MP. Combined together, the number of elected MPs is racially representative. And is that bad or good? I think it's good. Because the bad scenario is, under our first past the post system, you can have an unusual result after election night. Either zero minority candidates are returned or very small number. That will not be good for Singapore. I think that the elected presidency really worked to achieve its intended objectives requires two elements. And I think we have to evolve. We're still evolving. First, the candidates themselves. The candidates must have the requisite qualities and qualifications. They must have sufficient experience in administrative and financial matters to be able to engage with the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister of the government who want to spend the reserves, and he wants to challenge them. He must have the necessary wherewithal intellectually and in terms of experience to engage them in a debate. Why he might want to allow or might not want to, exercise his custodial powers. A candidate also, during the elections, must not inadvertently or deliberately confuse the voters as to what exactly they can do and cannot do. Let us hope, it is my hope, that as we evolve, that more and more electors will be mindful that this is different from the general election. People can vote in an unsuitable governor, an unsuitable prime minister. If that scenario happens, there will be necessary checks and balances. Unlike the three previous prime ministers whom I served, I'm not part of the government now. I have observed them before they took over the reins of leadership from Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. I was very impressed, and I've stated this publicly, with the way in which the 4G handled the COVID crisis. That was a very dark chapter in our history and the history of many countries. It could have easily gone very, very badly for Singapore. But compared to other countries, we weathered it quite well. As an outsider, I watched how Prime Minister Lawrence Wong and his team had fared since the elections. And as a citizen, I'm cheered and I feel that Singapore is in safe hands.